So our next presenter, and he is from the Government Chemist laboratory in Kenya. And it's a great honor to have you here today. And it was wonderful to see your entire team here yesterday. So exciting to meet you and learn of the great work that you're doing. Dr. Kimani has had, I think you've got 24 years of experience in forensic science. You have published on allele frequencies as well as pathogenic mutations in several international journals. I know that you're very highly respected by not only your team, but by many other communities in the space throughout Kenya. And I'm sure that other laboratories in the East African community will be very interested to hear of your work that you are presenting today. We welcome you and please take the stage, and we look forward to the presentation, which is a case study on complex identification determinations. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to get you a fresh glass.
Morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Vanessa and the entire team. I think I want to begin by telling all of you welcome to Nairobi. I'm born Kenyan, and make sure that you sample our coastlines, our national parks. I don't work for the tourism board, but if I don't say that, then I will not be truly Kenyan. I think there's so much of my introduction that has been done by Vanessa. I'm a forensic genetist. I have specialized in human genetics, and I work for the Government Chemist. Government Chemist is an institution that deals with analytical and forensic services. Here in Kenya, we have presence in Nairobi, in Mombasa, and Kisumu. And later we have a new kid in the block. We have a branch in Marsabit. Government Chemist is quite an old institution, actually, for people to know. It was started in the year 1912. So it's over 100 years. And we started doing DNA the year 1996. So our DNA infrastructure actually goes all the way for 26 years. And we have both the equipment and the expertise, and we are doing quite well. Now, sorry, I think this is the wrong slide. Yeah, I don't know what. There's a newer slide. So as they put together the latest PowerPoint, as I said, we have done a lot of milestone cases. And in my discourse today, I'm going to particularly delve to 3 very unique cases that we have handled very passionately. And myself and the team, we are very passionate about the evolution of forensic science in this country and probably in the rest of Africa. Needless to say also that we have trained the rest of our East African brothers, and we are not bragging. We trained our colleagues in Tanzania, we have trained our colleagues in Uganda, Rwanda, and recently our very brothers from Puntland. So I think you should give us a round of applause just to appreciate us. So as I said, I'm going to delve into a few case studies that I think should be of note. And the first thing that I want to mention is how critical the management of the crime scenes in relationship to DNA analysis. Actually, I'm going to talk about a case study of a multiple accident that happened in one of our major corridors, a place called Naivasha Karai. in this particular incident, there was an accident that involved two vehicles. And then one of the vehicles caught fire, which spread very quickly to 12 other vehicles. These vehicles were in a traffic gridlock, and all the people got burnt. They were charred beyond any physical recognition within their vehicles. So you can actually realize how painful that experience was. That happened way back in the year 2016, the 11th of December. And the initial activities that happened at the crime scene made it very difficult for other downstream processes like DNA analysis for identification, because the first responders to that incident, they literally had no knowledge, no forensic knowledge of managing crime scenes. So these were traffic officers, and their first call was to clear traffic. It's a major economic corridor connecting Kenya with other countries in East Africa and in the north of Africa. So there was this priority to clear the vehicles so that traffic can flow again. Now, due consideration was not done in terms of what should happen with the forensic analysis. So you can actually be able to appreciate that those were 12 vehicles actually, which you can see the extent of how the vehicles burnt, and you can only imagine what could have happened to the people, the occupants of those vehicles. So what happened when it was priority to just clear the vehicles so that traffic can flow again is that now everything was done haphazardly. Yeah, the people who visited the scene, it was not cordoned, it was not secured. So you can see everything is haphazard. You know, there are police officers, there are members of the public, people are not having special PPE, and bodies were removed without any consideration to forensics, and therefore most of the bodies were dismembered. So when the bodies were recovered from the vehicles, you realize there were so many body bags with commingled remains from different bodies. And then, because these bodies were completely charred, there was no way of physically identifying those remains. That would mean not the facial, not the fingerprinting. So the only thing that could happen was that we were to do DNA analysis. Then you have a lot of commingled, although some of the bodies were almost intact, but we had a lot of commingled remains. So that is the corridor, is a very major highway. And some of the problems that we have is that the remains were not preserved in situ. And you can see most of the body were dismembered, put in, commingled in different body bags. So the risk of contamination that would eventually make the process of DNA identification very expensive and very laborious. Actually, several days after the scene had been cleared, bones were still getting, some of the remains were still getting covered. So each vehicle was not documented very well, and a consideration should have been done in that regard for recovery. And all these remains were exposed to agents of degradation and deterioration. However, we had actually to be able to identify all these bodies. So some of the bodies were taken to a mall called Chiromo, others were taken to KU, and we were called upon now, together with the other forensic teams, to be able to go and conduct autopsies and do DNA identification. The good thing that happened is that during the postmortems, we organized ourselves into teams of 5, and the lead was the pathology, forensic pathology. We had a DNA expert within a group. We had a homicide person, scenes of crime personnel, and of course the morticians. So at least during the autopsies, things were done the way they should be done, in terms of forensics. However, because of those challenges that I've told you, our DNA team had to work very hard, even including almost throughout the night, to be able to come up with the DNA profiles. Actually, I would remember very well, we were taking home sometimes some of our team members, even past midnight. And it was so humongous. The work was so humongous to an extent that we took about 3 to 4 weeks to be able to do full profiles and connect these profiles with families. It took us about 3 to 4 weeks. We even internalized the individual DNA profiles. I remember that sitting somewhere in front of a screen, and this is a body part profile, and I would actually tell offhead, that profile is for body 1802. Yeah, we had actually internalized literally all those DNA profiles of over 40 plus individuals. So it was so humongous, it was a lot of work, but we used this now as a learning curve. So come year 2017, we had another case which happened in one of our schools called Moi Girls. And now we did things differently because we had learned a lot from the Naivasha Karai incident. This is an inferno that happened in one of the dormitories in this school called Moi Girls. And almost a whole block of a dormitory was brought down. And there were kids. There was a stampede. There were kids all over there. So many of them were injured. And 9 of them, 9 beautiful little angels, succumbed during that inferno. So they were spread all over the dormitory. But this time, things were done differently. This time, it was a multi-agency approach. The right people were called in. The DCI people were in charge. And the entire place was secured and cordoned, including the politicians were not even allowed to access. I remember a former prime minister coming all the way to the scene, and they were not allowed to come anywhere near. So this was very well managed. The remains were documented in situ. The scene was properly marked and documented. And you cannot imagine that we were able to generate DNA profiles within less than a week. Within 3 days, we had already actually gotten all the DNA profiles and be able to match them with the families. And within a week, all the families had been able to get their loved ones, because we had learned our lessons during the Naivasha Karai incident. In fact, as I was following up very, very keenly when Steve and Ahmed were speaking, you have really to have a personal touch for doing the forensic work. Recently, I visited a family in Gong. They were my very close friends. I visited them, and hanging on their wall was a photograph, a portrait of a young man who is a former GSU officer. And I didn't know he was a part of the people that died during the Karai incident. So I asked the family, who is this guy? They said, this is one of our nephews, and he died during the Naivasha Karai. And I asked for the name. And I remembered the name. I remembered the body number. I remembered the profile. So these things are personal. They are connecting to real people and to real families. And actually, the family told me that we knew you were involved, and we are taking this opportunity. It could have been even 4 or 5 years after the incident happened. But they told me, go thank the government chemist and everybody involved for what you did for us and for what you did for our family. So it is very personal. It involves people. It involves families. So the overall challenges that we found that would lead to, if handled, will lead to a lot of successes in handling and analysis of DNA. One is that we have to do things very quickly, and we have really to be very particular and intentional at the scenes of crime to ensure that we are not exposing the remains to agents of degradation. The issue of the command and read agency at the scene has to be very clear. Otherwise, we will have a lot of tampering, a lot of contamination, a lot of confusion, information inaccuracy. We also have to be very passionate about the relatives. Yeah, we have very emotional relatives. They have lost people, and we have needed to feed them with information. In Moi Girls, we had surging crowds. Actually, the families wanted to break the cordons and go and see their loved ones. So we have needed to be very sensitive. We have also to be alive to the fact that if we are to do DNA analysis, then we have to ensure that the remains should not, for whatsoever, be preserved in formalin, because it's really a bottleneck in the downstream processes. The issues of commingling remains is a very key issue, resource mobilization, and also how to manage the media in such incidences. Now, I want to conclude by talking about another milestone case that we handled in our lab. And it's a case that I would really like to talk about. All of us probably are aware there was a twin bomb incident that happened in August 1998 at the American Embassy in Kenya and the American Embassy in Dar es Salaam. That was way back in 1998. I think in our country, we lost to the tune of 220 people. Now, the mastermind of the twin bombing was a guy called Mohammed Fazul. I think he's a citizen of Comoros. And then later on, this same guy masterminded the Kikambala terrorist attack. So this man, when all those incidents happened, then he left Kenya, went to Comoros, then came back to Somalia, and then secretly slipped back into our country. And then went to Malindi, a place called Malindi in our coastline. And there was a family that was harboring this fugitive. To the extent that this man was given a wife and had the time even to sire children. He sired 2 boys. So when the police got wind and they were really on his case, I think somebody sneaked the information and then he was able to sneak out, go to Somalia, but he was able to leave out some very important items that we used for DNA. So where he was living, he left a shaver, but by that time, nobody knew actually that probably this was Fazul. He left a shaver and a jury cup. And then we were called upon to do DNA analysis for paternity. So we were able to get the touch DNA from the jury cup and from the shaver, and we compared that DNA with the DNA of the 2 kids and the mother, and we were able to conclude that actually the donor of the DNA generated from the shaver and the jury cup is actually the biological father of these 2. Now, much later, Fazul, who was held up in Mogadishu doing his terrorist activities, was gunned down by the FBI. So they shared with us part of the sample. We were able to do we generated another DNA profile. That DNA profile matched loci and allele for allele with that of the shaver, that of the jury cup, and thereby we were able to know that actually that was the DNA of Mohammed Fazul, the twin planner of the planner of the twin bombings at Kenya and Tanzania. And that family, there was a case that was going on, and I think it was concluded recently, and they were convicted for harboring a fugitive. So beside those few cases that I've mentioned, our lab has done a lot of many milestone cases, including the recent one, the Yala bodies. We have been able to identify many of those bodies. And I want also to say in this room that we have all the DNA profiles for the bodies, even those ones which have not been matched. We have all the DNA profiles, autosomal, and we have all the Y chromosome profiles for all those remains. So those are part of the cases that we have done, including the Dusit that happened recently, the Westgate, the Garissa attack. All these cases we have handled in our lab, and we are still going on. So I wish to thank all of you for listening to me.
Apparently we have one question for you, so I'll just get them over here. I'm very interested in your technique that you used in extracting DNA, not only from commingled remains, but also burned. If it would be possible to share so that we can support our interlocutors in identification processes in Ukraine.
Very well. The first thing that I would like to mention, we are very particular about the samples that we get from remains. Throughout our experience and the studies that we have done, we have realized that it's also possible to get what we call some body blood swabs, even from child remains. If you get you do an incision deep into the muscle next to a long bone, you stand chances of getting some good blood swabs. In fact, I would literally say like that Naivasha, the Moi girls, most of those cases were actually done on body blood swabs. So that is very key. The next thing that we look at is the cost of cartridges from the sternum area. We realize that also DNA preserves very well the nails and the long bones, like the femur bones. Now, each of those different types of samples calls for different protocols. When you come to the blood swabs, even just me doing Kilex extraction would be able to give you some good profiles. But as you go to the nails, as you go to the bones, as you go to the cartridges, we are using the Profiler BTA developed by Thermo Fisher. Yeah, I will not go into the protocol. That is exactly what we are doing. And we have realized that you are actually able to get some good DNA. The only thing that you do is that you lyse it for a little longer. Yeah. So we had a modification of our protocol that we are lysing it for 48 hours as opposed to 24 hours. You are able to get good quality DNA that can give you profiles.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that you're following closely in the steps of Dr. Bedoli in terms of teaching, and maybe you should also consider having your own workshops for the East African community, because you certainly are very knowledgeable, and it's been fascinating hearing the work that you've done in all these cases, as well as, oh, sorry, I must switch this off. Do you mind taking this thingy? And just the potential of DNA, even in really difficult cases. It really also brings to mind that this is all being done on a case-by-case basis. And when we think about forensic DNA being used to its full potential, we need databases, because we can take it even further when we start collecting DNA, not only on a case-by-case basis, but also when we start using it for criminal investigations, for criminal intelligence. And today we are also going to hear about how we can extend the use of DNA from case to case to actually criminal intelligence through policy changes and through laws. And I really hope to see those kind of developments happening in Kenya, because certainly the work that you're doing is exceptional. And I really think that the capacity needs to be built up to continue to do the amazing work that you do. So thank you for sharing that with us today.